One thing you ought to know about me is that I do not like to do things that I am not good at, okay? Anybody would say that's you as well? Okay. So like for example, I like kickboxing, okay? My family owns a martial arts school here in the area. I've grown up doing kickboxing and jiu-jitsu. I don't like baseball, okay? It's America's pastime. I know. Should have stayed in the pastime, okay? I don't like baseball because I'm not good at baseball. I struck out literally 18 times in a row as a kid, okay? So I don't like baseball. I like history. I don't like math. Why? Because I'm not good at math. I like working on my MacBook. I do not like working on my car. Why? Because I'm not good at working on my car, okay? So you get the picture. And my wife, Leanna, who led up here, God love her, she has a honey-do list about a mile long for me, okay? And sometimes I need her dad to come over and help me with it, all right? Because for me to accomplish things around the home, I typically need to make like 2 trips to Home Depot at minimum, okay? I need to like call my dad, watch a YouTube video, and have a quick session with ChatGPT to figure out what's going on here, okay? At the end of the day, I usually don't have the time it takes to figure it out because what might take you 5 minutes will take me 90 minutes. And I usually don't also have the tools to figure it out to get the job done. Now, here's what we know as humans, okay? You might be good at one thing, you might be good at a different thing. You might be good at the same thing or the completely different things that I'm good at. But here's what I know. As humans, we tend to avoid things that we are not good at. Sure, some of you like challenges. That's great. But in general, if there's something we are really bad at, we're not like, man, I'm really looking forward to that task today. So if we don't have the time to figure it out, or if we don't have the tools to figure it out, we tend to not enjoy doing those things. Now, here's why I bring this up. Last week, we began a brand new kind of our fall message collection, our series called The Gap. And what I brought to you all is we studied that there is, particularly in the South, a gap between those who have become a disciple of Jesus and those who have made disciples. So we did what we've done many times where I said, how many of you all believe we should go and make disciples? Think about the verses we just read, and hands would go up. How many of you believe we should baptize, teach? Hands would go up. But if I said, okay, how many of you all have ever actually done it? How many of you ever went and made a disciple, or made a disciple who's made a disciple, or led someone to faith in Jesus? There would be obviously many less hands in the room. And there is a gap between those who've become a disciple and those who have made a disciple. Now, last week I introduced to you all a stat, and here's what it said. It said this, that it takes the average Christian 26 years of church attendance before they personally lead someone to faith in Jesus. Now, that is the year 1999. Who in the room was not born in 1999? Okay, so these are full-grown adults that have been raised, and that's the time that it takes for the average person of church attendance to lead someone to faith in Jesus. Now, I don't say that to shame you. I do not say that to condemn you. I do not say that to say, well, because you haven't done this thing, you're not a Christian. Okay, that's not my goal. My goal is to simply invite you into this series to learn what it means to make disciples. Now, last week I talked about a guy in the scriptures. He was the rich young ruler. He was young, he had money, he had power, he had influence, and he wanted to follow Jesus. But Jesus looked at him and said, hey, if you want to follow me, sell all that you had. And what Jesus was doing is he was getting to the point in his heart where the man realized, I can't follow Jesus because my paradigm for making decisions was my money, my wealth, my youth, my influence, and not the kingdom of God. And he couldn't do it. Now, some of you all, the reason why you're not making disciples is because something has more authority than Jesus. But there's an entire other group of you all who it's not an authority issue. It's not, I just can't, I'm not ready to rearrange my schedule. For some of you all, it is something different, okay? And so we've brought up this illustration. We can go to the very end of the illustration for this one, of this gap, where I'm aware of making disciples. I'm pondering, and so I go to church or I listen to podcasts and I think about it. And then I believe we should make disciples. And then there's a giant gap. where I believe it, but I haven't yet reprioritized my life like Jesus calls the rich young ruler. And so what we said is for some of you all, what's standing in that gap is the authority piece. Have I been willing to give Jesus the authority in my life? But then there's an entire other group that it's not authority, it's simply this. I want to make disciples, but I don't know how to. I want to make disciples, but I don't know how to. For example, you might be asking the question, how do I do this? How do I have a spiritual conversation? It's going to be awkward. It's going to feel weird. How do I do it? Or how do I lead somebody to faith in Jesus? How do I baptize them? How do I teach people to obey all that Jesus has commanded? Therefore, for some of you all, the conversation has nothing to do with authority, but more about strategy. I don't have the time to actually take and learn of what it means, and I don't really even feel like I have the tools to do it. Now, I know this is something that is very common amongst U.S. Christians because Barna Research confirms this. When they were doing a study, they said this. They said that the U.S. Christian barriers to making disciples. Now, 14% kind of defined their barrier as other, why they're stuck in the gap, other. 3% said they had a bad experience in the past. 22% said they just haven't thought about it. That's actually pretty common. Nobody's ever told me. I thought in the South, sometimes you think, oh, as long as I go to church and I got my preacher, then I'm good. And maybe you've never been told that you're called to go and make disciples. 24% says no one has ever suggested it to me or told me to do it. But the majority in this chart, 37%, that's almost half, guys, says, I don't think I am qualified or equipped to do it. Not an authority issue, but a strategy issue. And the truth is, many of us today are to disciple making the way I am to plumbing, okay? I don't have time to figure it out. I don't have the tools to get it done. Therefore, I'll simply put it off and hire the paid professionals to come over to my house and do it for me. So today, what I want to do is I want to speak to you on the second gap that I see, which is the strategy gap. Because here's what I know. The more I get to know you guys, we celebrated our first birthday just a few weeks ago. And in the year or so that I've gotten to know you all are amazing people. I mean, some of you all, I listen to the stories of what God's doing in your life. Our partners, which are our members here, we have a place where we share stories of what God's doing through our ministries and through as we have conversations with people. And it's just absolutely ridiculous what the Lord is doing through some of you all. It's some of the finest people I've ever got a chance to be around. And so what I believe about you guys is I believe that you guys want to make disciples. You want to see more people baptized. You want to see lost people get saved. You want to go do the Jesus stuff. But many of you all just simply don't know how. And so today's message, what I want us to do is I want us to look at Jesus' strategy for making disciples. Because he's the ultimate disciple maker. We want to be a disciple underneath him so that we can go out and make disciples. So what I want to do today is look at his strategy. How did Jesus do it? Because if we can learn, you may not know how, you may not have the time, you may not have the tools, but guess what? You've got the manual. You've got what Jesus and how he lived his life. And so I want us to look at Jesus' strategy. So we're going to start today in Mark chapter 1, verse 16. So if you have your Bibles, I encourage you to bring your Bibles or on your device, go to Mark chapter 1 and turn there with me. So most people believe the Gospel of Mark, which is an eyewitness account, was the first written gospel account. So many of the gospel writers actually take their material from their source material in Mark. And I love that in the Gospel of Mark, in the first chapters, Jesus is calling his disciples. And so what we're going to look at today, which I think just kind of puts a big priority on what Mark wanted to communicate, kind of the whole following, the whole kind of movement of Jesus started with a few disciples. And so I want us to look at this, all right? verse 16. Here's what it says. It's talking about Jesus. It says, passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon. Simon is who we know later as Peter. Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church. That's Peter. He was the one he was talking to, the guy who cut the ear off, denied Jesus 3 times, ended up being the leader of the church. I mean, pretty big deal. So he's calling Peter. He saw Peter and Andrew, the brother of Peter, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Now, notice Jesus is going on and he's making disciples. And here's what he doesn't have to do. He doesn't have to get his passport, and he doesn't have to get an airplane ticket, and he doesn't have to fly to another city. He's just walking around the place that he lived. Jesus is living in a local space, a local time, a local place, making disciples out of the other locals. All right? He's simply doing his life. He's not having to go somewhere. He's just living where he's at. And here's what it says. It says, verse 17, and Jesus said to them, follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men. Now, they're fishermen. These guys are blue collar. These guys are regular dudes. They're not the educated of the bunch. They're not the highest in the social order. They're fishermen. And the play on words in the original language would have been the same play on words if I said, hey, you're going to be a fisherman, you're a fisherman, now you're going to become a fishers of men. And so it's kind of a play on words in the original language. And so Jesus says, I'm going to change you into something. Now, we know from other texts in the Gospels that this is not the first time that Jesus has met Simon and Andrew. So it's not like some rando carpenter rabbi is coming up to you and saying, come follow me. Like, he knew these people. He lived in this community. So he comes up and he says, follow me. And he asks them essentially to leave their jobs and follow him. And here's what the scripture says. Verse 18, it says, and immediately they left their nets and followed him. Man, what would it take for us to have an immediately type of faith? A faith that when Jesus says go, we go. When Jesus says stop, we stop. When he says give, we give. When he says serve, we serve. We don't need to get a second opinion. We don't need to get somebody else's input. We don't need to ask our mamas and our daddies. We just need to immediately follow Jesus. What would it look like to immediately follow Jesus? And he says they left their nets. This is key. And going on a little further, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother. So there's 2 other people who were in the boats mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with their hired servants and followed him. Now, I'm going to touch on this a little more on Kickoff Sunday here in a few weeks. But when they said they dropped their nets, remember how they fished at this point in time? They had these big, massive nets with weight on them, and they would throw them out into the ocean, and that would or in the sea, and it would drop down over the fish, and then they would gather that up. So when they were dropping their nets out of the boat, this wasn't like that they were just dropping them and putting them in their closet so they could come back at some point in time. These were big nets, so when they dropped them into the water, it would be like a videographer throwing his camera away. It would be like a carpenter getting rid of his nail gun and his screwdriver and the tools that he needed to survive. It would be like a banker getting rid of his money counting machine and getting rid of his computer. These were the tools that he needed in order to survive. And he's saying, I want you to drop them, and they leave them right there. And God calls them to follow him into a process called discipleship. Now, the Navigators, one of the largest Christian sending organizations of all time, defines discipleship as this. Discipleship is developing a personal, lifelong, obedient relationship with Jesus Christ in which he transforms your character into Christ-likeness and involves you in his mission. Now, here's what happens often in our Christian culture, okay? In Christian culture, what happens is we will have people say this. You might have heard this before. They will say, hey, I am looking for a discipleship church, okay? You might have said that before. And then they'll have other people who will say, I am looking for an evangelism church. And what we often do is we take these 2 different whatever we have in our mind for churches, and we kind of pit them against each other. And we'll say there's discipleship churches and there's evangelism churches. And so we kind of pit them against each other. And so we think in our mind that evangelism churches, they're always saying, hey, invite your neighbor. And they do the big like at the movie series where they theme a whole Sunday around a movie theater type thing. They host the big events. They got the big LED walls. And they give away tons of money and food and resources. And we're like, that's great. Those are the evangelism churches. And we're thankful they're there because they're reaching people. And then we'll say, okay, well, then there's discipleship churches. And we'll say, okay, well, discipleship churches, they got real strong coffee, Like they got men with beards, like big beards, okay? They got reformed, exegetical, verse-by-verse preaching and Bible studies and string lights, none of those LED walls, okay? And so what we do is we often pit them against each other, right? And we'll say, these are two different churches. And the funny thing is that I've heard since we started planting in 2023, that people will come and say, oh, why'd you come to local? We were looking for a discipleship church. And then in the same room, somebody will say, well, I'll say, why'd you come to local? They'll say, well, we were looking for an evangelism church. And they will begin to describe our church as two different things. Maybe you said that. Maybe that's the reason you're here. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing at all. But here's what I want to kind of get you to see this morning, that they're the same thing. So to illustrate this, look at Jesus' vision for discipleship here, okay? And you can see it so clearly in this sentence. The first thing he says, come follow me. This is evangelism. See, every time that you encounter Jesus or experience Jesus, he's asking you to take a step. He's asking you to come, follow me, make my ways your ways. In fact, that's what we're in this season. We're saying, hey, if you've had a spiritual conversation, drop a ball because it always starts with an invitation. Come, follow me. Come see the guy who told me everything I ever knew. Come see him. Behold the Lamb. There's a come, there's a see, there's an evangelism piece. We want this. But then he doesn't just stop there, right? He doesn't just say, raise your hand, walk an aisle, pray a prayer, sign the card, we'll all clap, see ya. No, there's the next step. He says, I will make you, okay? This means there is a process. There is a strategy. There is a way. There is a forming. And listen, I don't know if you know this, but when you have to form a piece of metal or you form really anything, there's a bending that takes place. It is malleable. It's not always comfortable. So there's a process where he makes you. Now, a lot of people would just call this discipleship. And I actually think that's kind of a better way to call this is formation. That God is forming you into the likeness of his son. So he says, come, I'm going to form you, I will make you. But then embedded in Jesus' first call of discipleship is the idea of multiplication. He says, to become fishers of men. See, Jesus is not just calling you to salvation, he's calling you to become something new. He's not just saving you from sin, he's saving you to good works. And some of you think, I'm saved from sin, so I'm good now. I got my get out of hell free card. No. He didn't just save you from sin. He's saving you for good works. So there's multiplication embedded in here. We could show it like this, that this is Jesus' vision. This is what discipleship is. It's all inclusive. And you can't have churches that are healthy that just do one of them. Discipleship means we are evangelizing, we're forming, we're multiplying. Or in other words, he says, I'm going to call you. I'm going to form you. I'm going to send you. And see, when Jesus said, go make disciples, he's not saying, go lead a bunch of Bible studies for a bunch of church people. He's saying, go tell the world about me. Go evangelize. Go do spiritual formation. Go do multiplication. It's all discipleship. It's not about just creating new programs for you who were bored at your last church to come to find a new church that's a little bit cooler. That's not discipleship. It's all of it. It's evangelism, it's formation, it's multiplication. This is Jesus' vision for what discipleship looks like. So when we say go make disciples, this is what we're calling us to. And Jesus spent almost his entire ministry with 12 dudes. It took him 3 years, and they still barely got it right, and one defected, and that was Jesus. He spent so much of his time taking these men through discipleship. And I believe God is inviting you, kindly inviting you into this process, and he's inviting you to help others do the same thing too. But the question still remains, because you're like, hey, I agree with it. I took a picture with my phone. I wrote it down in my journal. I'm ready, okay? But you still didn't give me the how-to, okay? So here's what I want to do today. I want to show you, as I look at the life of Jesus, and this is going to be a kind of a brief overview. You could write, books on pieces of these. And so I'm not going to do every piece of this justice. And what I'm going to do is kind of show you a diagram that I drew up that kind of shows you what I think the life and the process and the strategy of Jesus is. And I want you to know that anytime you make a diagram, there's always holes, there's always imperfections, and you're not going to find this thing at the back of your Bible. All right? But this is my way of kind of taking what I see the life of Jesus and his ministry strategy and putting it into words for us. But let me break down what I call the 6C strategy of discipleship. So the diagram I'm about to show you is just my way of showing you how Jesus did his ministry. And so 6 C's here. So there's 6 C's I want to remind you of. The first is this. It's the word consecration. Consecration. Now, the word consecration is not a word that we usually use often. If I asked you what you're doing this weekend, you're like, oh, I'm consecrating myself unto the Lord this weekend. It's probably not what you're going to be saying. But when we talk about consecration, the word simply means to set apart, okay? That you're setting apart yourself to be used by God. And the thing about Jesus is Jesus was constantly spending an inordinate amount of time in the wilderness, okay? Men, this is your excuse. You need to go hunting this week, okay, right? All right, Noah, you need to go hunting, okay? You in? All right, he's in his camo ready to go today, all right? So he's spending time away from the crowds, away from the busy schedules, away from all the needs, and he's spending time with his Father. See, some of you all, you want to go do and you want to serve, and that's amazing. But don't forget, all of that starts at the point of setting apart ourselves to be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, so that we can do the things that Jesus does. And if even Jesus needed to be alone with the Father, how much more do we need it? So it all starts with consecration. But then we see that after he has consecrated himself, as he has set apart his time to be with the Father, he goes back into his community. You're not called to go live in a monastery for the next 15 years, okay? You're called to be around other people, okay? And so we see that he is in a local community. He was born in Bethlehem. He grew up in Nazareth. He lived in Galilee and Judea. He spent his hometown, his home base of ministry in Capernaum. This is his community, and he's walking around. He's seeing needs. He's healing hurting people. He's preaching the gospel wherever he goes, because he's a regular carpenter, rabbi, dude in a local community meeting the needs of his community. And as he does this, crowds begin to come. That's why we're not afraid of crowds at local, okay? Some of you are like, well, I just love how small it is, okay? You're going to hate heaven, okay? It's not small church in heaven. There's a lot of people. It's okay. All right? We're not after crowds. Jesus wasn't either, as we'll see here in a minute. But he's not afraid of them, because the crowds came and he fed them. And he said that he saw them as he had compassion on them when he saw them. Not pity, because they were a sheep without a shepherd. And so he has compassion upon the crowds. And he feeds them. He heals them. He gives them resources. Just like next week, we're going to be giving away groceries to college students. We're going to be doing more things throughout the fall as we're serving the unhoused community and doing all these new outreach things, okay? The crowds are good, but Jesus did the opposite strategy as the false prosperity gospel preachers do. When he got the crowd, you know what he did? He ran them off really fast. He gave them ridiculously hard things. He would say, hey, unless you hate your father and mother, you can't have anything to do with me. Unless you're willing to let the dead bury their dead. I mean, he is just upping the ante on the crowds, and people just kept following him. And so what he's doing is he's doing with the rich young ruler, he's asking them to radically reprioritize their life to what's called commitment. Committed. Somebody asked me, yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of commitment at local. Yes, there's a lot of commitment when it comes to following Jesus. It's kind of the thing. And so we see that he loved the crowds, but he spent so much time with these committed people. And we see he has this 120 people who are following him. And he was calling them to radical commitment. But the place that Jesus spent most of his ministry was not with the crowds. It was with his core. his 12 disciples. And even more so, he spent even more so time with Peter, James, and John, who was kind of like the inner circle of his core. And so here's the way I think this kind of looks in a diagram here. I drew this out, and so here in the middle is kind of a gear. That so much of Jesus' ministry came out of that setting apart in the wilderness. And the community, they were showing up to the crowd. The crowd, he was calling them to engage in a level of commitment. The committed, he was calling them to in even closer and closer to the core. And the core, he was sending out to go plant churches, to multiply, to go be the fishers of men. He says, I'm gonna call you, I'm gonna form you, I'm gonna send you. And this is how Jesus' discipleship strategy began to look. And so you might look at this here and say, okay, again, Landon, I'm with you, but that means I got to be in the community crowd, community core. I already got something. We got soccer practice on Wednesday and Tuesday nights now. So what am I going to do? Well, I think a lot of people, they hear about Jesus' call for discipleship, and you know what they feel? They feel this word that's really prevalent in our culture, pressure. How do I do this? I can't keep up with it. I can barely answer my text messages. What do you mean I got to do all of these things? I'm never going to get there, so let's just call the paid professional to come do it for me. Okay? Well, if you'll realize, we're missing a sixth C, and that is the church. See, the context unto which all of these things are happening is within the local church. And you may say, well, wait a second. Jesus' ministry, there wasn't even really a church then. All of his ministry was setting up the church, was getting the guys ready who were going to go out and plant churches. And so Acts, we see the ministry beginning to keep going. And so Jesus kind of establishes the context for unto which this mission is going to go forward, and that is through the local church. So here's my point. Stay with me here because I want to explain this. All right? When Jesus says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples, he is not looking at Peter over a cup of coffee. He's looking at the 11 disciples. So God's plan to reach the world is not you, it's y'all. It's all y'all. It's all of us. It's together. My point is, you're not called, or you're not given authority. You're not called to make disciples. You're not called to baptize. You're not called to go into the world. We together are doing this. It's not all on you. The pressure, you can take the pressure off because it's not all on your shoulders to do this, y'all. God's church is. See, people often say this. They'll say, I don't need the church. I am the church. Like we've never thought of that before. And here's the truth. No, you're not. You don't have elders. You don't have membership. You don't have church discipline. You're not given the responsibility by God to give an account for his people. God's church together is. See, you are not the church. You're part of the church, the universal church. I'm not the church. Our elders are not the church. We're part of the church. And I understand why we said this, because there was a time where the institutional church had to do all the ministry. The pastor had to be there to preach at every sermon, every funeral, all the different things. You had to have the deacons do this, and there was kind of like this different class of people that could do ministry while all of us just need to go find our preacher and just sit in the pews. And so I understand why we begin to say this, like, oh, I am the church. And yes, you are a part of the church. But I think our American individualism ruins this type of thinking. Because we'll begin to say things then, because the next step is, well, I love Jesus. I just don't love organized religion. And to an extent, again, I get this. There's been a lot of institutions, hurt a lot of people. There's been a lot of pastors who've had big, massive moral failings. And there's been a lot of ministries that have done some really harmful things in Jesus' name. But if you sat down with me and said, Pastor Landon, I love your preaching. I love your ministry. I love to be around you, but listen, I just don't want anything to do with your wife. You think we'd be friends? No, we wouldn't. Because you can't love the groom while rejecting the bride. So you see, God set up his bride to be in local spaces and local places and be the context for which the Great Commission would go forth. That's why I don't love it, okay? I don't love it, guys, when baptisms happen outside of the local church. Okay, so hang with me. You see, baptism is not just a sign of personal salvation. That is a sign of personal salvation, but it's also a symbol of entrance into a new community. So I don't really like it when private schools do it or college revivals do it or parachurch ministries do it. Why? Because these things are good, and I love the parachurch. I love it. I think our city is so much better because we have so many great nonprofits like FCA and Emerald Youth Foundation and Hope Resource Center and the many great, awesome nonprofits. But listen, they're still not the church. God called his church to go and preach the gospel to the world, and that's us together. These things are good. I love private schools. My kid's in one. I went to Christian school. I love college revivals. I love the parachurch ministry, and our church gives to those ministries. But I love the local church far more because that's his bride, y'all. And you should too, which means, listen, this is good news. You want to know why? Because this takes the pressure off of you to get it all done. Because that means we get to do it together. You got strengths. That person has weaknesses. Guess what? You get to be their strength. You may not be great at, getting up and preaching, but there might be somebody in this room who can do that. And when we're all working together, this is the context for the commission. See, I love what Mark Dever says. He says this: the local church, this Father-designed, Jesus-authorized, and Spirit-gifted body is far better equipped to undertake the work of discipling believers than simply you and your one friend. Jesus does not promise that you and your one friend will defeat the gates of hell. He promises that the church will do this, and we are the church, y'all. It's not the organization. It's not the building. It's not a nonprofit. The church is a movement of disciple-making disciples. And the way that God intended us to make disciples is not separated from the local church, but it's through the local church. See, are you called to make disciples? Yes, you are. Through your local church. Are you called to baptize? Yes. You baptize them into community. Are you called to teach? Yes. But the extent and the context for these things is within your local church. That's why at our church, we don't have what is traditionally known as members. Because you become a member of a gym or a country club or a subscription service, or you take and you pay your dues. But instead, what we're saying is in this community, we're partnering together. So we don't call our members, we say we're partners because we're partnering together to accomplish a mission together. And so there's many of you all, you've been joining in for a long time. I want to invite you to take that step of faith and become a partner with us because we get to make disciples together. And when we baptize, we're putting it up on the scoreboard saying, look at what God is doing through us, not just you and your one friend. So do we matter? Does our obedience matter? Does our personal going and telling? Yes, you're going to have to do all those things. But you don't have to do it alone. And that's the beautiful thing about God's church. So what are we going to do? How do we do this as a church? Dallas Willard once said that every church needs to be able to answer two questions. First, what is our plan for making disciples? And second, does our plan work? So my hope for the last couple minutes of this message today is to share with you about our plan. This is how we make disciples together as a church. And so based upon our 6C strategy, this is what we have come up with as a team. This is our discipleship strategy as a church. The first thing that it all starts with is the gear, and that's consecration. It means we set apart radical amounts of time in our life to be with God, to become like Him, and to do the things that He did. And so for us at our church, that starts with our prayer room. Now, you may have never heard of our prayer room, or you've never been a part of our prayer room, and it's something that we've really tried to be intentional about developing, but it is the least, fancy thing we do, guys. It is people in a room in an older church at 7 a.m. every third Thursday. And by God's grace, we're going to start more prayer rooms in the future, but that's where we started. And I really believe if you've only been to local on a Sunday morning, you probably haven't got a full picture of what our church is like. This is a big part, of course, but man, when you see 30 to 40 people showing up at 7 a.m. to have really no speakers, barely anything like we have here today, just to pray and seek after God and to call upon Him to move, man, it's beautiful, guys. And so much of what God has done in our church has been an answer to His people calling upon Him to move. It's the gear that makes everything work. But then, what are we doing? We are the church in our community. So we live in a specific place. Some of you all live in South Knoxville. Some of you all live right here in Powell or Carnes. Some of you live in Anderson County. Wherever you are at, you have a community of people around you. And our goal is we're constantly walking and thinking, where is the Spirit prompting us to begin to meet needs, to pray, to share, to have those gospel conversations. And what we're inviting them to, that's our outreach. We're having different outreach opportunities. We have, of course, our big emphasis for the fall, which is gospel conversations. We're doing what we call Good News in the Neighborhood coming up, where we're just going and sharing the gospel door to door, asking for how we can pray and meet needs. We have after that, or before that, we have our College Welcome Weekend. These are just different opportunities, like things that we can all do together for outreach. And what we're doing is we're inviting them to be a part of our crowd. Sunday morning is a great place to invite your friend or neighbor who might be exploring Jesus. Because I think when you get people around the people of God, man, there's something special about that. We're not designing our Sunday morning specifically for the lost person, but we know that there are lost people in our church every single week. And we want to talk in a way that they can understand. And so we always want this to be a place, from our guest experience team to the way that we've designed our gathering, to where you can invite somebody and they can get around you. That means when you worship on a Sunday morning, you're not worshiping just, it's not just between you and God. We're creating an environment where people can see, what does it look like to follow Jesus? Oh, that person's singing like they're singing to someone. They are. This is our apologetic to our community. So, and in the crowd, we're constantly inviting people to be a part of groups. We have our community groups that are starting up. We have discipleship groups that are happening. We'd love for you to get involved in one of those. And after you've been to a group for a while, we're inviting you in to what we call partnership. And that's where we're saying, hey, are you called to be a part of this? Are we going to partner together to go out and do what? Make disciples. And so it goes on. This is our strategy. And there's so much more going on at local church than just that. But at a big picture level, this is how we together are trying to do discipleship in our community in this specific place in time. So, I say all that to say, where are you at? Ooh, something found on the web. Where are you at? Where are you at in the process? Maybe for some of you all, you need to begin to radically reprioritize your life for consecration with Him, spending more time with Him. Come to our prayer room this Thursday morning at 7 a.m. For some of you all, you need to sign up for an outreach opportunity and start putting feet to your faith. Some of you need to take that step of becoming a partner here and saying, all right, I'm in. We have our welcome dinner coming up next week. That's the first step in that process. I don't know where you're at. And the good news is, I don't have to tell you what to do, because you have the Holy Spirit of God in your life. And He can lead you to whatever your next step is. But here's my challenge. As you follow Jesus, bring someone along with you. Just bring somebody along with you. See, Jesus says, follow me and I will make you fishers of men. And so much of that is Jesus like, hey, come with me. I'll show you. Come with me at church. Let me show you what the people of God are like. Let me show you my family. Let me take you home and see mama and dad and the siblings and the uncles and the grandparents and all the spiritual family here. Come check out my family. Just bringing somebody along with you. Oh, wow. You wanted to show somebody how to worship. Well, get them around about 100 people who know how to worship. See, so much is just inviting people along. You want to teach somebody to make disciples? Well, when you make disciples, go bring somebody along with you as you do it. You want to teach somebody to pray? Bring them with you as you pray. You want to teach somebody to worship? Bring them with you. You want to teach somebody about following Jesus? Bring them with you as you are following Jesus. You never do ministry. You never do discipleship alone. You're always bringing somebody with you. That's why empty chairs are bad things in churches. Why? Because it means we're showing up without somebody that we're bringing along with us. The Apostle Paul said it so well in 1 Corinthians. He says, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. And some of you might not think this sounds right, but you can argue with Paul, not me. Some people need to follow you before they follow Jesus. You've got to be following Jesus, and they might want to hang around you for a little bit. And that's a beautiful thing because you get to introduce them to the best part of your life, and that's your Savior. So much of ministry, so much of discipleship, so much of the strategy here is just bringing somebody along with you as you do it. The two men that discipled me, a guy named Bobby and a guy named Trent. And, I remember when I was, 16 years old or so, and so much of discipleship, and the reason I'm in ministry is just because they let me kind of tag along with them. I didn't have anything to offer. They let me watch them preach. They let me see them, how they talked to volunteers and how they led meetings. And I got to watch Bobby, the way that he loved his wife and the way that he parented his kids. So much of the way that I was formed, but I was just simply, it wasn't a one-on-one conversation with a 10-point outline. It was just watching people. See, that's the thing. You look at that kind of diagram there, and you think, wow, that's like is that like a system? Is that like a factory? No. Everything Jesus did was relational. Just inviting people to have meals with them. Let them see your life. So much was just me watching these two men follow Jesus. And I learned how to follow him too. Sure, were there intentional conversations? Yeah. Were there times I had to get my stuff in line? Yeah, I needed to listen. But it was a lot of life-on-life, relational, bringing somebody with you as you follow Jesus. So you follow Jesus, and we let others follow you as you go. And then the multiplication begins. The early church father, Tertullian, said this. He says, Christians are not born, they are made. And some of us today, we need to get back to the making part. And some of us today, we need to be made into a disciple of Jesus. So I don't know what the Spirit might be leading you to do today. But I hope you'll obey it. Because he'll take you deeper and deeper into this process of discipleship. Because he's saying the same thing he said to Simon and Andrew. Hey, follow me. I'll show you. Follow me. I will make you become something that you never dreamed you could become. They were fishing, and then they launched a movement that led to you sitting at Jubilee Banquet Hall today. They could never imagine, but this is what happens when we simply follow Jesus. And here's the beautiful thing, is that we can follow Jesus today because of what he's done for us. Right now, we're going to go into a time of communion.